And we are recording on Sunday, November 19th, 2023 at 1:11 p.m. Eastern Time with Mr. Tom Luongo and Mr. Vince Lanci. We're going to talk about, I guess, the incoming World War III worst case, Cold War II best case, but war nonetheless. If you go into the description, you can find both their Twitters. But with that, I just finished up an hour and a half episode and I have to go fucking piss. So I'm trusting
Of
you guys
course,
to take it away. And
of
I don't
course.
think you can get me. Shut up, Vince. I don't think you can get me banned. So, take it away, dude.
You get catheterized.
So, that Carrigan guy, I know how much he loves the Jews.
Listen. Oh man.
I'm just trying to get him banned. Like he's on
We
Rumble,
should
so he really can't get banned.
exactly.
Vince, how are you today? I know we had so for those of you guys that don't know, Vince and I have we've been chatting since 8 o'clock this morning
That's right.
about stuff related to China, debt, Thailand, the dollar, and having a grand old time. And it was hilarious.
That's right. That's right. We were slated to do, Middle East stuff and Syria, but the China thing, because Eric's post fell on our laps, and so naturally we became experts in that because
Well, yeah, because that's actually what we're experts in.
That's what we do. Exactly. We like Syria, Middle East. I don't know, maybe, but China definitely. I'm an expert. I'm fluent in Google Translate.
So for those of you who don't know what the fuck we're talking about, so this morning our mutual friend Eric Young posted a quick synopsis of a conversation he had with a Chinese economist recently, and saying that okay, so what China is doing is to help out their local trade partners over in Southeast Asia. And I've been saying, and FYI, guys, I've been saying this for years that China doesn't manage the yuan's exchange rate versus the dollar. They haven't for years. They care more about the real effective exchange rate of the yuan as it pertains to their trade partners that provide all the things that actually keep China running. That would be like Thailand and Malaysia and Vietnam and Singapore and whatnot, and Indonesia, the Philippines, the ones that provide the rice, the palm oil, the soybean oil, all the stuff that they need. And that's far more important to them than, what they send us in the form of cheap plastic goods. So the situation is as follows. It's very simple, actually. Because Powell's raised rates so fast, a lot of emerging markets are struggling, and a lot of countries within those countries and whatnot are struggling with servicing their debt. That's all, denominated in dollars. This is kind of the dark side of Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory, and China's helping them out by saying, look, we'll help you get the dollars you need, and we'll loan you the money in dollars, but you pay us back in yuan. And that's the text of the conversation. And I can tell you that the Chinese have been doing this for a lot of their trade partners for a while now, and most notably Russia, which is what I said to Vince. I said on the internet this morning, and Vince was like, "Oh my God, you're right." And then he's like furiously texting me behind the scenes, and I'm like, "Did I blow your mind yet?" So
Yes, Tom,
that's the background of the
mind.
conversation. We're going to start here because this is the important one, folks. With a 5-day ceasefire in Gaza between the Israelis and the Palestinians as they do the prisoner swap thing, we've postponed World War III for, well, at least for the Thanksgiving holiday here in the States.
Exactly. Let's do the Chinese thing though, because it's fresh in our minds, and when Tom comes back, we can segue into. Shh, he's already back.
You're here. Shut up.
Yeah, he might. This is Tommy Carrigan of the microbladder. It does not take very long for him to pee, and he's in his 30s, so the shit actually comes out, and with a reasonable amount of force.
Yeah, so, and you know what? If I play my cards right, I should be able to get a sponsorship from Depends or fucking Pfizer or some fucking medication that will make me piss less. None of which I've done so this far. But so my buddy actually, the reason for this episode is my buddy actually I'm banned from Twitter, but he sent me a screenshot of Vince, I think sometime last week, tweeting about how the US will, no matter what, we are fighting Russia. We've made up our minds. That's what we're doing. That's just, it's like whenever you hit that like certain point in the night where you're like, I'm getting fucked up tonight, right? There's no like, maybe I'll have a couple and go to bed and hit the gym. So when you go, I'm doing something tonight. I don't know what it is, but I've approached. I'm over the apex. I am now in a ballistic trajectory. It just is what it is. It's just this is where I'm going. Let's just lean in. That's kind of what we're doing, right? This isn't condoning it. It's just what it is. And so Vince was saying that we are fighting Russia. This is just what it is. We've made up our mind. I can't help but think that these are all little pieces being fucking moved around by some DARPA AI supercomputer, Ukraine, Taiwan, Hamas, Israel, to eventually culminate in World War III. And this is all directly to get everyone back on the dollar system and say, fuck off. We're not doing bricks. I think somebody had a tweet about how like they're like I don't, it might have even been one of y'all saying like, hey, the US is we're gonna throw the geopolitical chessboard at the wall. And again, this isn't condoning it. It just is what it is. I always say that just because I think something's gonna happen doesn't mean I fucking agree with it. It just gun in my head. This is what I think is gonna happen. I think these are all little pieces leading into World War III, where we fucking take on China. But that's not really the scope of what we're doing today. Vince, could you maybe explain really exactly what it is that, or what it was that you were saying about the U.S. taking on Russia and Syria, just quickly?
Yeah. I mean, this is not my expertise. I'm familiar with the Middle East as it pertains to commodity flows and what it will do when there's news out there. But this makes sense, and it's not stretched. And although it's not front page, it's not going to be front page until it's front page, because there's so many other, bigger things to talk about with regards to the Middle East right now. But as the Ukraine was, when here's how it went. As Israel and Hamas went to war, and almost simultaneously, Ukraine started unwinding, right? My anti-Russian, neoliberal side came out, and I went, oh, we're just going to fight Russia somewhere else now. Where we're going to fight them. And I was talking to a buddy of mine about, well, he's a fund manager, and he's got a lot of knowledge about Taiwan. We were talking about the politics in Taiwan, but we ended up talking about the Middle East. And he has a very good relationship with a retired Air Force colonel. Now, he won't tell me if it's a U.S. Air Force colonel or if it's Israeli, but it's someone who's familiar with Israel. And that person, he shares with me, he says, well, he goes, we don't like Syria. We don't like Russia in Syria, and we haven't liked them in there forever. And, when you look at the past, this clicked to me because I understood it. The quick background is, for, those who don't know, is Russia doesn't have much access on the east side to deep water, right? So, I don't know the technical terminology, right? So, and
water ports.
Right, exactly. Yeah, saltwater ports, right? And they really prize Aleppo and their access that Syria gives them in Aleppo. And what's the other main?
It's at Latakia. It's the naval base at Tartus and the air base at Latakia. Aleppo is in the north.
Right. Well, Aleppo is where the fighting is. Tartus is where the naval base is. Thank you. Right. Sure. And I was really up on that back in 2016. Obviously, I'm not up on it anymore. And I know that we want to limit their access to Europe via water. At least that's what I that's what I understand. And I did know that the Crimea, when in 2014 when they went for the Crimea, and they pretty much got it, that gave them access. And so 2016 we're fighting them in Syria. And now 2022, 23, we're fighting them for the rest of the water access, among other things. And now we're going to pull out of that, and we're going to focus on. I'm just thinking about it in terms of like a connecting of the dots that I think are relevant. So now we're saying now I'm being like an American imperialist, and I'm saying, you know what? All right, so they're going to have Ukraine. We're going to kick them out of Syria now. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what he's saying to me, right? I'm like, I don't get it. And he says, well, whatever's going on, Israel has had this plan on their books for a long time. He wasn't saying they instigated it. He's saying it's a contingency. If if Hamas does this, what do we do? And it came out in WikiLeaks years ago as well. And basically, it's if Hamas, whether it's false flag or not, I don't know, but if Hamas tries to rule Gaza, it becomes a parking lot. We're just going to flatten the shit out of it, and that basically becomes uninhabitable for anyone, kind of like a DMZ.
Mhm.
And then that's where the conversation started with this guy in Taiwan. And I said, okay, well, how does this do with Syria? He goes, well, did you notice? This is where it started. Did you notice as Israel is bombing the Syrian airport, and I'm like, 2 Syrian airports, and I'm like, yeah, well, isn't that a source for Hamas backing? And he goes, yeah. He goes, that's a great excuse. However, there's a big Russian presence there, and the U.S. doesn't like that. And sure enough, that night or that day, we started sending our first aircraft carrier group there. And he said, watch, this is how it ended. And I just went off thinking that it was, something that really could happen. He said, I don't know what's going to happen in Israel, his buddy said, because of Netanyahu's domestic political issues. He said, but the U.S. is there, and they will take the opportunity for a land grab in Syria if they get it. And that's it. So I went, oh, they are fighting Russia, So anyway, so I had a brain fart. That's it. That was it. That's it. But
Okay. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Vince. We've never stopped fighting Russia in Syria. There's a reason why we're still in Syria. It's why we still have the base at Al-Hol. Now, this is the part of the conflict that I know really well. I mean, to the point where, like, oh my God, do I have to talk about this again? But I'm happy to do so. The Russians move into Syria to help out Assad in October of 2015, 2 days after Putin goes to the UN and gives the "Do you understand what you've done?" speech. Right. And for those of you who haven't watched that speech, I actually urge you to do so, because he follows up on I don't remember if it was the Iranian president or if it was Khomeini at the UN. They were kind of tag teamed on the same day, right? That this is what's happening in Syria is, not acceptable. What you've unleashed with this war in Syria is unacceptable. At that point, you got to go back to 2015. That's when millions of Syrian refugees were flowing into Europe and into Turkey and everything else. Coptic Christians, by the way, were being slaughtered by the thousands. No one wants to talk about that because, well, that's not germane. No one cares about Christians getting killed in the Middle East because it's because that's de rigueur.
Right.
So, of course, it is always about warm water ports, and this is British foreign policy going back 300 years. With the war in Syria ramps up after the reunification with Crimea, where they now have access. Now they have Sevastopol, right? They still don't have Odessa, but they've got Sevastopol, and that begins to turn the Black Sea into a Russian lake, which of course is anathema to British, American foreign policy, military doctrine going back hundreds of years.
Right.
So now we take it one step further, and we come outside the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, controlled by the Turks, thanks to the 1936 Treaty of Montreux, and now the Syrians give the Russians access to the airbase Latakia, which is where the Russians' main force in Syria is. They just moved 42 planes in, and they started giving air support to the Syrian Arab Army to take back most of the entire country. That's what the Russians really provided for the Syrians in 2015 through 2017.
Can I just interject one thing
west of the Euphrates, to take back basically everything west of the Euphrates River, except for Idlib province, which comes down from Turkey and that borders Lebanon and northwestern Syria. Idlib province is still controlled by Erdogan's crazies, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is Al-Qaeda rebranded 17 different ways from Sunday in order to get around U.S. definitions of who is and who is not a terrorist organization, by the way. Every time the Americans virtue signal about wanting to put another group on the terrorist list, that same group renames themselves so that they don't fall on the list. This is all just fucking lawfare, terrorist style, okay? in the global war on terror trade, folks. Now, at the same time, Erdogan moves down because he was told he was going to get Idlib and a big 30-mile buffer zone between what is southern Turkey and the Syrian border, and he moved in, right? But the problem for the Americans for the last 7 years has been the following. We're using the Kurdish-backed SDF forces and the PKK forces to fight our war for us. And that is a red line for Erdogan in Turkey, or Erdogan in Turkey. That's what you have to understand. For us to hold on to all the territory east of the Euphrates River, which is where all the oil is, to starve the Syrian government of access to so we control that. And then we have a big air base at Al Tanf, or just a big base at Al Tanf, which is in the south central Syrian desert on the border with Jordan, to cover the Al-Buqamai border crossing from northwestern Iraq into Syria, east and west of the Euphrates River. This is how Iran is able to move more material to support the Syrian army and Hezbollah and Hamas, supposedly, and the rest of them. And the Israelis have been bombing the Al-Buqamai border crossing on and off for the last 7 years. But so this is what this is all about, because we refuse to give up and lose in Syria, because now the Russians have a presence, and a permanent presence, at the airbase at Latakia, and a naval, and now a 90-year lease on the naval port at Tartus, which is right next door. So that the vaunted Russian Navy, and I use that term sarcastically, because the Russians don't have much of a navy, and the Brits have done everything they can to help the Ukrainians sink as much of the Russian Navy in the area as possible. This is part of our attrition strategy to keep the Russians from having operational control, theater control over the Eastern Mediterranean, to link their trade routes and Eastern Europe's trade routes through the Black Sea with the Suez Canal, now that Egypt is part of the BRICS. Okay, so that's what this is all about. That's what Syria is all about, ultimately. And Israel, and then flaming up Israel-Gaza, again, you decide whether it was a false flag. I don't care at this point. I just know that everybody pulled their Plan R off the shelves and turned it into Joan Ripper from Dr. Strangelove, and we're off to the races here, right? So this is what's going on, and you got to remember as well that there was the explosion at the Lebanese port in Beirut, okay, a couple of years ago. The only working port on the outside of Tartus on the Eastern Mediterranean at this point is Haifa, controlled by Israel and so Israel. And of course, if the Palestinians of Hamas are able to oust them from, we can't have, the Palestinians making noise on the port at Haifa. And that's, of course, how Israel wants to then, they've resurrected this Ben Gurion Canal,
right,
boondoggle thing, so that they can get around Belt and Road coming east out of China into Iran, and the international north-south transport corridor going from St. Petersburg down to the port of Chabahar on the southern tip of Iran, which is east of Bandar Abbas and the exit from the Persian Gulf, and then gives Iran and Russia multimodal trade access to India and the rest of Southeast Asia. This is everything about our doctrine, military and geopolitical doctrine, is bottling up the Russians inside the Black Sea at best, if not take the Black Sea away from them, and bottle the Chinese back up behind the Straits of Malacca, north of Singapore. Okay, that's what this is all about. And the Chinese and the Russians are doing everything imaginable to create land bridges and ways out and get around all of those geographic bottlenecks. This all goes back to Halford Mackinder and the geopolitical pivot of history, or the geographic pivot of history, and all of that stuff. And that's the key. And if you want to understand why these sectarian conflicts between Arabs and Jews, and between Russia, between Slavs and Muslims and everything, this is what it's about. It's why Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia. It's why the Kurds are always given money to go, start some shit. It's why we've put a currency, we've done 4 rounds of currency war against Erdogan and Turkey over the last 5 years. Okay. This is what this stuff is all about. Okay. That's the big background on this stuff. Now, Tommy, while you were out taking a piss, I'm going to bring back what we led the show off while you were gone, which is that Vince and I have been talking about, and he and I have been talking about on my podcast. He's been on a couple of times, and we've talked about this stuff. The role of gold and the process of de-dollarization that's happening, and how ultimately, at the end of the day, all of this shit's not going to matter because the world is deglobalizing. Okay. And in order to stop the world from deglobalizing, they need a war. But who's they? Well, who's they? What I keep saying over and over and over again. It's the old colonial powers of Europe who don't have any physical collateral for their economy, who don't have enough hydrocarbons, who don't want to give up their privileged position of controlling the global debt markets and the global bond markets. That's the key. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about the British faction or we're talking about the European faction. They are not the same thing. And they both have the ultimate goal of destroying the Chinese, destroying the Russians, and destroying the United States to bring them low. But then they're also fighting amongst themselves as to who gets to reign supreme after everybody else has been destroyed. That's why they're trying to get the three of us to fight a big goddamn world war. And it doesn't, and so at times you'll see Davos be on board with World War III, and at other times you'll see the Brits, they're always on board with World War III. And then they go back and forth and they fight amongst themselves. And I've got news for you, folks. They're fighting right now over control over Israel's politics. And they have been for years. The Davos, the best way I can put it is the ones that the members of the Israeli political system that map to Davos are not Netanyahu. They're guys like the guy he just replaced. What's his name? Oh God, I can't think of it off the top of my head. And Naftali Bennett, okay, and his faction, and that's why Netanyahu comes into power and out of power. It's why every 18 months is another Israeli election. It's why Trump got rid of the JCPOA, because he understood that having a rapprochement with Iran will allow Europe to invest in Iranian oil and gas and then get them the collateral they need. Syria was always about bringing the Middle East gas and oil into Europe, bypassing the Russians, and undermining and effectively undermining all that and strengthening the European Union. Meanwhile, the Brits traditionally have no desire to really be subsumed into the EU. They want to still be their independent power. They still want to control the United States from behind the scenes. That's why you see British and American geopolitical moves in the Middle East coordinated. And so they back Netanyahu to get rid of, and Trump goes along with this to get rid of the JCPOA to stop Europe from getting access to capital, to the collateral. And Trump's like, no, we'll sell them the oil. We'll sell them the gas. And since Trump is such a simple fucking creature, he went along with this bullshit, perpetuating this conflict, constantly running everybody back and forth as everybody triangulates against everybody else every fucking 4 months. And we can't ever make sense of what the hell's going on because everybody's moves on the board are changing. One day they're working with each other. One day they're working against each other. As a matter of fact, every day they're constantly, you look at the different factions within each of the governments in the US, in the UK, in Europe, in Israel, and you see like completely contradictory behavior on any given fucking Thursday. Yeah. And who's in charge at that moment in time? Yeah. And then when the US military is put into a position where they actually have to confront a major power, they're like, fuck a whole lot of that. We're not doing that. And then the cooler heads prevail. And then you start to see people like Blinken and Sullivan and the rest of them back off and then tell Netanyahu to stop slaughtering Palestinians for this week. We'll do it later after the Overton window shifts.
Give him a break.
So,
not
great.
you, Tommy. Give him a break, man. He's fucking been running on us.
What?
No, this is what happens when Carrigan has me on the podcast. He usually has me,
No,
Dave
no,
Collum, and Jim
he's
Cutler,
covering,
and we he just sits back and talks, and we just like do this thing for 3 hours.
Here's what's going on, Tom. Tom to the L, right? Tom's like, I just did fucking 90 minutes of a broadcast. Okay, he's riffing. He's got a couple good topics. Fuck that. I'll just chill out and sit back here.
No, I'm listening.
That's what he does.
Of course you're listening. Of course you're listening. No, that's the way it works.
This is the first time you've been on with us, Vince. I'm dead serious.
I'm gonna
do the bald ones. It's crazy.
I'm gonna have Vince shot. Vince is coming on here trying to tell me how I do my goddamn show. We'll have a war. We'll have our own World War.
You're the chief. You're the chief compromat. What's
dude,
the word?
Dude, our 90-minute cast before this was. How do you think I did 1,370 episodes in like 3 years?
I know.
I do multiple shows a day. You.
Oh, please! I'm not telling you.
I will ban you. I will ban you. You are out of my. You are out of my inner circle.
It won't be. It won't be the first place.
You are banned. No. It's this is kind of fleshing out a general idea we've gone over multiple shows of kind of at the highest level exactly what the fuck is going on, and there is no accurate picture. I mean, if you had to boil it down to like a single thesis sentence,
right?
It's really not even that unique. It's like everyone is out for their own good, including the people on the same. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, the U.S. versus China, or U.S. versus Israel, and then within the U.S. and then within federal, local and state, and then it's all the way down to like school boards, and it's like, so what's the conclusion? Everyone's out for them. I remember my buddy, he's like the smartest guy I know. He's a doctor now. I remember he was a year ahead of me in college, and he was like, beware of organic chemistry. And I was like, fuck. And he like built it up to be this huge thing. And it was difficult. But I remember I was going into it, like my first day of lecture, I texted him. I was like, hey, dude, any advice? And he goes, carbon makes 4 bonds except for when it doesn't. And I was like, fuck off. Like, it's the most simple. It's the most, Vince didn't take organic chemistry. So it's like if I said, how do I invest? No. And you said, buy low, sell high.
Right.
I'd be like, eat a fucking dick.
Right.
It's, but like,
eat a whole bag of dick.
All right,
but this is my like conclusion. It's like, so what's the conclusion on everything going on right now? It's like, people look out for their own interests and they work together when it's in their own benefit. Like, it's such like a bullshit, like, do unto others as you'd like to have done to you. It's like, that's the wisdom. Like, early bird gets the worm. Like, you fucking
it's actually, Tommy, it's more like, do unto others before they do unto you.
Well, that's a preemptive strike.
No, but see, a lot of this shit is over my head. So I want to ask. Look, I mean, if I were to make like, other than the real takeaway, which is everybody is doing for themselves, and or do to them before they do to you. Okay, so this is where like I'm lost on the not lost. I'm not play by play on this stuff. Like, Tom's got this stuff in his head, from left to right. Like, I'll talk about some other topic, but what I'm pulling out, and again, I want to make sure I'm pulling out the right things, and I'm not sure is. If I were to like pick 3 boiled down points, but not quite as boiled down to fuck, everyone's out for themselves, which is the truth, right? It seems like everybody wants. I'm paraphrasing what Tom said. Everybody, it's a fight over Israel's politics, right? That's one thing, right? And geographically, it's a fight over warm water ports,
and trade routes.
Right. And the third thing is so I'm looking at it like that. I'm looking at it like Israel as a as an epicenter, right? Yeah. Warm. And then the third thing, I guess, is it's an ideological fight because of the whole British European thing. You know, like, I don't know what the third thing is. So it's a
civilizational fight between who gets to control, because it is an ideological / civilizational fight. Ultimately, you have one group of colonialists who have been running things for a long, long time.
So that's the
being
European.
stood up.
That's
That's
the
the
European.
Europeans.
Okay.
Being stood up to by the next group of colonialists who are rising. And then the question is, in the short term, and that is a cynical view of the Russia, China, Iran.
Are we the next colonialist, or is China the next colonialist? Like
the Russia, China, Iran colonialist.
Okay, right. And so we're kind of like the financial colonialists.
Right. And the question is the following, and we don't know this, and I'm saying this as that's the most cynical take, and it's one you should bracket for, which is that, the Chinese are just going to fill in as we pull back, because we're going to, because that's part of what what Vince and I were alluding to while you were off, emptying your bladder. The mechanisms by which they're doing this in the debt markets. The question is that, going out 20, 30, 40 years in time, when after, it's just a posit that China, Russia, Iran, the BRICS win, split the world up, and in the West's kind of impotent rage, commits ritualistic suicide across the board. Right.
We're the ones that are vacuum, do that.
Meaning, well, the Europeans say, well, if we can't win the game, then we need to destroy the United States while we're at it, and in order so that we don't get completely squoze out, and we'll destroy the U.S. and then we'll still be able to trade with the Chinese and the Russians, and we'll have to make peace with them eventually, and yada yada yada. Meanwhile, of course, everybody east of the Balkans basically are looking at the situation going, we're never going to trust you again. Right. It doesn't matter how many trillions of dollars your GDP is and how much gold you have. We're never going to trust you again. We're actually not going to sell to you. We're going to watch you burn to the fucking ground too, because we're so fucking angry with you for the 600 years of misery you've put on all of us, the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese. They're like, no, we're done with you fucking people, because we know what you'll do the minute we let you up off the mat 25 or 30 years from now. You'll start this shit all over again. So we're not going to let you off the mat. And this is the part of the problem that the European solipsism about how fucking vital they are to the world. And I'm talking about the leadership in Europe. They have this solipsistic, they're still stuck in the solipsistic fugue that's the 19th century, and they're so goddamn important. And
still feudal. It's still feudal for them. You know what I mean?
It's still feudal to them.
Feudalism,
feudalism. Feudal, not futile.
Right.
Futile, right? And these guys are like, no, we're never going to trust you again. No, we're never going to do that. We understand the Americans. And if we let them go, we know that the Americans are not ideologically driven on this stuff. They just want to, the Americans are like, yeah, we just want to trade, and we understand Americans.
We're infected by that European ideology.
We're infected by that mind virus, that colonial mind virus, but we can be cured of it. Because of the way our structure, because of the way our political system actually operates.
That's right. That's why we're changing right now. That's why the whole ESG thing is backing off domestically. That's true. Yeah.
So this is so Tommy, when your conclusion that do unto others before they do unto you is the right takeaway in terms of how everybody's acting, but bring it back one step farther and ask yourself from a bigger question, in the sphere of influence question, and the larger flow of history question, which is the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians are civilizational powers. They think of Russia is bigger than the system that Russia implements at any given time. China as an identity is bigger than the system that Chinese people live under at any moment in time. Same thing with the Iranians. They have adopted these top-down strong central government models because they understand that at this moment in time, this is the way you weather the storm of the impotent rage of the end of European feudalism and colonialism. This is how you do it.
Right. And they use nationalism as a pullback after the USSR and the communist ideologies collapsed. That's exactly what they did, right?
Yeah.
So
Russia and China, everybody's clear. And just so everybody's clear, and I'll tell you this, Vince, I know you keep using the word nationalism. I'm going to cure you of this because I'm going to teach you how to think like a commie. You have to change the terms. Nationalism is a 4-letter word beginning with N and ending in I. Change the term to sovereigntism.
Well, that's the European mindset, right?
So and again, when people hear, because we've so infected people with the idea that nationalism bad, nationalism equals Nazi, don't use the term nationalism. Take a page out of the commies book. Redefine the fucking language.
Right.
You play the same language games that they. This is why I like the term sovereigntist and sovereigntism.
Right.
They are sovereigntist in their mindset. We are Russia. We are sovereign. You are Europe. You can be Hungarian and you are sovereign. That's why they hate Viktor Orban. But the French want to believe that way, and they're trying to destroy the idea of national identity and of individual identity.
Right.
At the same time, they're like, no, you have to be a global citizen, and you want to do away with and you know, you can even say to their credit, if you're being generous to these fucking people, which I shouldn't ever be generous to them, but let's be generous for a moment and say they really do believe, as you and I talked about the last time we were on the podcast together, and we were talking about this stuff at the end, and we were talking about, okay, the Europeans are so scarred from World Wars I and II that they see nationalism as the bad thing. That
petrified of individualism.
It's bullshit. It's bullshit. They created that, and they created the ultranationalism in order to have a straw man by which to do their to put into effect their larger agenda. And they're doing the same goddamn thing between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And here's the gig: we're all victims of these people. The Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, the Americans, the Poles, the Serbs, the Britons, Britons, not the British establishment. We're all victims of these fucking people, and they all need to go away. The Africans, the South Americans, everybody in Southeast Asia, and they all get it now. And the only reason we're having this conversation in this context is because the Russians stood the fuck up to them in 2015 in Syria and went, by the way, they're not going to do a goddamn thing other than bark a lot, and this is why. Done. And then once we threw the kitchen sink at the Russians and the Russians didn't collapse, everybody's like, we might have a way out of this.
Yeah.
And that's where we are today. And we're downstream. We're 8 years downstream of this, and that's why everything's a mess today. But the Russians have been on point, and they understand what they're doing, and they know exactly who the enemies are and how best to beat them, because in the past, they're the remnants of the Russian Empire, of Tsarist Russia, and then of the Soviet Union, left them weakened as a civilization to the point where it took time to rebuild. Once they hit rock bottom in the 1990s, we now got hard times make strong men, and Russia is now ruled by strong men. And the only way the Russians don't collapse is if Putin wins re-election in 2024, isn't poisoned, yada, yada, yada. Because Putin's temperance is what's keeping Russia alive. He understands that the way you beat these people is just to outlast them. You win by surviving. You don't win by confronting them. They want you to punch back.
Right.
So, yeah, blow up Nord Stream. We can rebuild it. Blow up the Kerch Strait Bridge. We made it modular because we knew you people would blow the fucking thing up. Guess what? We can get it back up and running in 5 fucking days.
Right.
Like, yeah, okay, we'll play the Keynesian broken window fallacy, and we'll even add that shit to our GDP, and we'll play the same game everybody else is. But the reality is that they understand it. They have a huge, huge, huge war chest to rebuild. Massive savings account. Massive national savings account. That's criminally understated by their foreign exchange reserves and the size of their sovereign wealth fund. The Chinese have so much dark money, so much wealth that they don't have on balance sheet, carried off national balance sheet. It's retarded.
Oh yeah, Mongolia is off balance sheet for them. You know what I mean? It's like Mongolia. The whole country is off balance sheet for them. You know, the gold of Mongolia is Chinese.
Kazakhstan is off balance sheet for the Russians, right?
Right. Kazakhstan for the Russians, Mongolia for the Chinese, and it's like, you know, I mean, I think Russia has like a serious rocket launch base in Kazakhstan. There's something very important about Kazakhstan for Russia.
The avant-garde missile.
Yeah.
The one that's got the nuclear power plant strapped to the back of it, and they can just like fly around the earth for a few years and then just kind of like drop out of the sky and say, you know, that Chicago, that was nice.
No way. All right, I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, this shit's real, and they may not have a lot of them, but they don't need very many of them.
Right.
So they had the test launch the other day. Putin announced those, and I'll be honest with you, Putin's State of the Union address, or the equivalent thereof, in March of 2018. I think it was March 3rd, to be honest with you. But you can look that one up as well. That's where he introduced the S-500s, the Avangard missile, the Kinzhal, he introduced all these new weapon systems.
Right, and we can't make those
fractional orbital bombardment.
I'm sorry.
That's the fractional. I'm trying to remember fractional orbital bombardment thing. FOB. That's where you throw a missile up and it's basically constantly in a decaying orbit, and you can bring it down whenever. So it's like you don't even need to launch a nuke. It's just
right. You don't even need a launcher.
The nuke's up there. It's just you don't have to launch it. You just have to prevent it from falling.
So that speech, by the way, marked another turning point that no one talks about. I have in the past, but I remember listening to that speech and all of that stuff, and the neocons immediately lost their mind and they went into overdrive about how we need to get rid of the Russians. And everything started to really ramp up, like, in response to that speech, because they understood that once those systems went into production, Fortress Russia effectively exists, and there's not anything they can really do about it. And that's why they're like, okay, well, the clock is running down. We need to get this stuff done. That's why Ukraine had to happen in 22.
Historically, Russia has always been European. How did they? I mean, I know they're in the middle, Eurasia, but how did this all started with us pushing them out? Like after they collapsed in the 90s. I'm thinking, I don't know the British, but I remember
the British were the ones that pushed all this. The British created World War I and World War II in many ways in order to, there's a very good frame on this. I wrote about this recently for Newsmax, about there's a way of looking at this that the British launched World War I to destroy the Ottoman Empire.
Right. To finish it off.
To finish off the Ottoman Empire. And that's one frame. It's not the only frame, but it's
no. I have a different frame altogether. But I see what you're saying. That makes sense.
Right. And so you have to, when you start looking at these big moments in history, you have to ask yourself why and what this is about and what's going on and yada yada yada. And it's why, like, Erdogan is done with these people. He understands this as well. He wants to restore the Ottoman Empire. I mean, and like, there's so much happening here where, for the first time in a long, long time, someone has the ability to stand up and say no, and there's not really much that anybody can do about it. And once you can do that successfully, you give voice to the voiceless and spine to the spineless. And I'm not, and again, that's not a value judgment. If I'm the Saudi Arabians, if I'm, not Israel, India or Pakistan or, anybody else, I would be scared shitless of incurring the wrath of the West. Like, you have to go along with it. It's not that you should be spineless. You should knuckle under, and you wait for the opportunity to overthrow the oppressor. The smart play is to go along to get along until someone stands up and starts to lead you out of the wilderness.
The very to that point, the very public moment, for me, because I'm looking at it through a lens of geopolitics and monetary effects. The very public moment that encapsulates what you're saying to me is there have been thousands of little cuts made at us, little nibbles at us, but they either get squashed because of financial differences or debt or trade or what have you. But when the war started, for example, like, we will put a country historically, right? We will put a country in its place, but never a country with nuclear weapons. Right. Okay. So Russia. So I'm looking at this like I'm from a little country. I'm a little country that's not friends with Russia, that is dependent. I'm looking at it from this point of view. And here's the point of view. Russia invades Ukraine and the U.S. puts sanctions on them. Okay. The U.S. sanctioned Iran before. they're stopping them from getting a bomb. I don't like it, but it's not me. It's not me. It's the whole, you're safe, right? They sanction this, they sanction that, but they never. I mean, they sanctioned Russia. Don't get me wrong, but our response to them invading Ukraine was sanctioning Russia, and to the point where it was destabilizing worldwide because of what it did to the financial system, what it did to trade, and what it could do to the world in terms of war. And what I mean is, I'm this little country, and I'm going, oh, they just provoked Russia, which has nuclear weapons, to feel existentially threatened, right? I mean, and so I'm that little country, and I'm like, okay, so now it's easy for me to say, I'm not going to tell the United States I'm leaving them, but I'm leaving them. It's like, that's what I'm going to do. And
well, as long as Russia survives it, Nick.
Right.
That's the important part. The key is everybody took a wait and see approach as to whether they were going to join the anti-Russian sanctions in those first couple of weeks. Everybody forgets this, but I was watching it like a hawk. We do the shock and awe sanctions. We freeze their foreign exchange reserves. We break all the international covenants and make a mockery of international finance, and everybody's like, what do we do? Do we go along with this? Well, let's watch to see what happens.
Right.
But we're denouncing Russia for invading because we have to, but we're not actually going along with the sanctions. Meanwhile, the US puts immense diplomatic pressure on everybody. We're running around the world, yelling at everyone, saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and no one did it.
Right. That's it.
When the Chinese said to the Russians, we don't like what you've done, but we understand why you did what you did. Then all of a sudden, then so did Saudi Arabia. Then so did the rest of OPEC. And they understood, and the Russians had made the case to them in the years since Crimea and during the years of the Syrian war. Look, this is what we're going to expose. We're going to expose their duplicity. We're going to expose that every ceasefire is a tactic, is a delaying tactic. Look at what they've been doing on the one hand, and everybody got it. And the Russians were smart. They were absolutely upfront and honest for as large a value of that word as you want to put into the context, in the geopolitical context, with the people that they were negotiating with, meaning Lavrov and company would go in and they would deal honestly and openly with these people as honest brokers. If they made a deal, they didn't go back on it.
It only took a little bit of honesty, meaning they don't even have to be totally honest. We're just so dishonest with them that 20% was enough for people to say.
All they have to do is show that, look, we're gangsters. You can make this argument. The Russians are gangsters. They run everything like they're a bunch of Russian gangsters. Yeah. But hey, the mob has an ethos. And this is and these are people I can work with because they have an ethos. Whereas the West has shown themselves to have zero ethos, other than do what I tell you or I kill you. And that tell you, not, hey, let's make a deal and then honor the deal. And if you cross me, well, then it's going to be bad. But by the same token. So there's a fundamental kind of difference here in terms of the mindset. And, with the Chinese and their economic power and Russia's diplomatic power, it became a nearly unbeatable combination. And then everybody saw the writing on the wall, and then eventually everybody else just said, you know what? No, I'm not sanctioning Russia. Even the Japanese wouldn't go along with energy sanctions on the Russians. Why? Because it would literally be the Japanese committing harikiri.
Politics is local, and in a deglobalized world, you have to secure your own supply chains, and that would have honoring our request would have damaged their supply chains. That's like
to a point where Japan would cease to exist.
Right. That's right.
Because there's not enough. I mean, we can't supply Japan LNG at anywhere close to the same price that the Russians can, and the Russians have worked their asses off to open up the Northern Sea route. And
in the ideological split that is the world, Japan's in the wrong half.
And understand that the Northern Sea route gets LNG tankers to Japan in 1/3 the time it takes for it to go around the world. Okay? So it's like a 40-day voyage. it's not very something like that. It's ridiculous. And so that, and with LNG, transportation and liquefaction are most of the cost
Right.
over pipe gas. And the Russians would be happy to run a pipeline into Japan, but that would be a bridge too far for the Americans. So that doesn't happen until the Japanese are able to fully declare independence. And when that does, and when they do, you will know, because there will be a pipeline built from Sakhalin, #2 on the Kamchatka Peninsula, across all those islands that they're still fighting the border war about over World War II,
Right.
in order to bring pipe gas into Japan. It can be done very easily. The Pacific out there is very shallow and would be easy and could easily be done. And it's not on the Ring of Fire, it's within the Ring of Fire.
Isn't that part of the problem not part of the problem, but that brings back to the whole deep water or warm water thing?
Mhm.
Isn't that China doesn't have a port out there that's deep enough? That's the problem, right? That's why.
Oh God, that's a good question. I can't answer that definitively.
No, I that's part of the whole them making their own islands and the
Well, that's about them being able to claim all the oil and gas under the South China Sea and to bottle up Vietnam.
right.
And getting into Vietnam then exposes one of the break points between Russia and China. The Russians are very deeply involved in Vietnam.
They are,
because they understand that Vietnam is one of their poison pills that they hold over China's head. Because the Russians aren't stupid. They understand that once, that if the West collapses, then they're gonna have to deal with the friggin' Chinese. They're not dumb.
Right.
And
right.
so, you keep good relations with Vietnam on China's southern border for very good reason. So this is part of the reason why I've been on the Vietnam Paracel Islands thing since 2011.
Right.
I mean, for Christ's sake, my beard was black back then. And I haven't talked about it a lot in recent years because it's not really that important.
It hasn't been a hot spot.
Remember, I worked with a guy in Vietnam for 2 years. I learned all about this shit. So
Vietnam's like a deep water port.
Oh yeah, I mean you've got the port at you've got a number of deep ports out there, but it's more than that. It's about helping Vietnam keep their domestic oil and gas industry from collapsing, so that the Chinese don't claim it all in the South China Sea.
Right.
That's why the Chinese are building islands in the middle of the South China Sea, so they can claim under UNCLOS, the universal under the universal treaty of the sea, that they can claim that they own these islands. And the Spratlys and the Paracels are they're still being argued about between the Chinese and the Vietnamese, and the Russians help the Vietnamese on this. They have very good relations with the Vietnamese.
Interesting.
TNK is in there. And the Americans tried to go in during the Obama administration, and the Clinton State Department tried to go in there, with Leon Panetta, tried going in to Vietnam and schmooze. I can't remember the name of the fucking port. It's right in the middle of the country. I can't remember the name of the port off my head. It's Hanoi's in the north, Ho Chi Minh City's in the south, and there's the one in the middle. Da Nang. Is it Da Nang?
I don't know.
It's one of them. I pull up a map of Vietnam. I'll tell you exactly what it is, but it's a little bit, it's in the back of the gray matter here. That's a little bit, out of date.
Completely unrelated, the Sam Kinison bit, where he's like, sorry, I'm late, everybody. I went to the gas station and the guy didn't speak English. I kept saying, Marlboro, and he didn't bring him to me. And finally I walked out and I said, I wish my uncle killed you in Da Nang when he had the chance. Sorry. Completely unrelated, but
so understand that this game is very deep and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's about debt and collateral always. And again, I want to get back to what I want to now bring back in what Vince and I were talking about earlier when we first opened the show. Because
we
prepped the audience for this, Tommy, but you weren't here.
Yeah.
So
this is current events. This is current events, Tom, and I mean it's really current events. So. It's relevant.
Like yesterday.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the word that we're focused on here for this part of the conversation is de-dollarization, right? Everybody wants to de-dollarize. China's selling treasuries, all that stuff. Everyone's selling treasuries. Nobody wants the dollar, multipolarity, blah blah blah, and that's all real. One of the things that was raised today by Eric Young, as Tom mentioned, was he talked to a friend of his, an economist, and the economist gave him, and I'll let Tom say what he said, explain what China's doing to de-dollarize and at the same time internationalize the yuan, and at the same time protect themselves from problems. And the reason the reason this is true is because they were already doing this. Yes. And now what Tom Luongo is going to say is going to say they were already doing this with other countries, and that's true. But the cool thing for me is I saw this happening in 2010. Now, not this exact way, but I think that China is now making loans, right? And you're going to jump in here to elaborate on this, Tom. China is now making loans to the global south. That's the terminology they're using, or the smaller countries that need dollars. You need the dollars because you're pegging to a dollar. You need dollars because you have dollar-denominated debt you have to pay back. You need dollars, right, to keep your country afloat. And so China's saying, we'll loan you dollars. We'll loan you dollars to, and then you can use those dollars to do what you have to do. And we don't want, this is what's different. They've done that in the past, and I want to get into the past a little bit because it's actually quite brilliant what they're doing now. But I will loan you the dollars, and when you pay me back, you don't have to pay me back dollars. I want you to pay me back in yuan. And the brilliance of this is China gets to de-dollarize, right? Boom, right? They get to get out of their dollar risk without selling dollars, right? The guy who borrows the dollars, he sells the dollars. Maybe he's selling dollars to buy, pistachios, or he's selling dollars, or he's giving dollars back to the U.S. on debt, but he gets to stabilize his economy. And then the third thing is in both inflationary and deflationary risks, China hedges itself from those potential crises. Deflation, an example would be as China internationalizes, their currency float is small and it has to grow. And as it's small and growing, they're susceptible to cornering and hoarding and just being screwed over, right? The flip side of that is, and Tom should explain this, they're protecting their sovereign debt in doing it this way. And after he does that, I think that the history part of it, from going back to 2010, is I think the most fascinating thing, and it just shows how they're not really reinventing the wheel here. They've already been doing this anyway. So what's the sovereign debt?
Okay, so what they're doing, like as you said, so just think this through, Vince, right, or everybody, as Vince pointed it out. The Chinese need to internationalize the yuan, right? And in order to do that, they need to radically improve the supply of yuan, right? Now, how do you do that? And the biggest barrier to the Chinese internationalizing yuan is getting people to take on the currency risk of putting yuan in their foreign exchange reserves, right? How do you get them how do you incentivize them to do that? Well, you do when they need dollars to service their debt and everything else. You've also got the Federal Reserve raising the cost of dollars, understanding that the world wants to de-dollarize and wants to get rid of their dollars and pay off their dollar-denominated debt and no longer have that sort of Damocles being held over their domestic economies. All right, well, how do you do this? So the Fed in anticipation of this has to sit back like a catcher waiting for the big throw to come in from left field or from right field to catch all the fucking dollars coming at them and all the treasuries that are being sold and figure out a place to put them. Okay, they're coming. What do I do with them? They're like, it's like it's a flood, and you got to direct the water somewhere where it can go and not overwhelm the domestic economy. And this is where all the hyperinflationistas don't fucking get it. I'm going to be angry here because it bothers me that people this smart can't see this because they should see it. Right. Because it's not that fucking hard.
You're talking about you're going to get into it, but you're talking about the simple concept that as the world is de-dollarizing, we're anticipating that, and raising interest rates repatriates the dollars. We're sucking them up.
And we're sucking them up, and that makes sense but it's not going to be enough because there's too much debt. And oh, fuck off. So, like, mud on the me. Because, oh, by the way, interest payments as a percentage of GDP are at a 30-year low, even though they've spiked in the last couple of years. I saw a chart of it this morning, for Christ's sake. It was worse after the 2008 financial crisis. So, FYI, it's not that bad yet. Okay, even though it's $1 trillion, and we see the everybody, the zero hedge does the doom porn thing, and yada yada yada, and Peter Schiff does the doom porn thing. I can piss on him because I piss on him all the time, because pissing on Peter Schiff is just, well, it's just fun. So,
by the way, Tom is a closet fan of Janet Yellen, because he's making her point. As long as real rates are positive, then we don't care about the interest. So, Tom has a picture.
But let's not get too nerdy on them, Vince. We'll leave that for my podcast.
Exactly.
So, in the broad strokes, you got to figure out what to do with all the dollars. I think the Fed and the PBOC understand this relationship, because otherwise, why would Powell and Gang Yi be on, or the head of the PBOC be on speaking terms, as opposed to Powell and Christine Lagarde, who are not? Right.
That's true.
It's true. They're on speaking terms. They coordinate. They talk to each other every once in a while. They let everybody know what's going on. So the Chinese are doing this in order to assist their local trade partners. And it's the trade partners that matter to the Chinese the most. It's the ones that produce rice and copper and coal and timber and soybean oil and all the things that are going to keep the domestic economy and the domestic unrest at a minimum. Right? And you got to keep the costs under control. So they can loan dollars. You pay me back in yuan. Yuan that you're making if you've got a trade surplus with us, because you're selling us rice, Thailand, or you're selling us tungsten, Vietnam, or you're selling us palm oil, Malaysia.
Right.
Okay. Or you're clearing all our yuan denominated transactions over for heating oil and for this and for that, all this shit, Singapore, and gold, Singapore. Blah, 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 or Australia, or New Zealand, or all these other countries that are, New Zealand sells them a ton of timber, the Australians sell them uranium and coal. I mean, there's all sorts of shit that's going on here. So they're getting yuan in trade. And now the Chinese are basically saying, look, we have a positive, incentivized dynamic for you to accept our yuan in trade.
Right.
Because you're then going to use those yuan that you're building up to pay us back the loans we made to you in dollars that you want to use to get rid of your dollar denominated debt and defend your own currencies on the open market.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a replacement. It's basically, it's yuan replacement theory is, I think, the best way to talk about this. We're replacing the dollar with yuan. That gives the Chinese the ability to massively expand the yuan.
Right.
Which then keeps liquid their domestic credit markets and all of the commercial real estate problems they have. Okay. At the same time, how are they going to issue all those yuan? Well, they're going to issue debt. And FYI, I was just looking at some charts the other day, and China's sovereign debt prices are the only ones are still in a bull market, folks. Everybody else is a bear market. Everybody else's interest rates are rising. The Chinese interest rates are not. And the bond prices are pretty strong. I mean, they're volatile, but their bond prices are rising as they issue yuan denominated. They issue, we have U.S. treasuries. They have Chinese treasuries, and they're sending Chinese treasuries in for the countries that are running a positive trade balance with the Chinese. Great. I need yuan. When I don't need them right now, I can, go in and buy a 6-month Chinese treasury.
Well, that's what they do. I mean,
the Hong Kong treasuries, I can do whatever I want with them. I can lay off the risk and, my other dollar risk and the Hong Kong dollar and all the rest of this, which is also now an interesting part about, I haven't even gotten into the Hong Kong dollar thing because it just popped into my head. But that's the dynamic.
Right.
Okay. That's the basis. And here's the historical precedent. Ready? Russia in 2014.
Right. They rescued them.
They rescued the Russians in 2014. In 2014, the United States and company ran a massive operation to drop the price of oil, coordinated attack on the price of oil from $125 a barrel down to $28 from June to November. for the first few months, the Russians defended, you're going to love this one, defended the ruble, which was trading between 28 and 32 to the dollar. And Putin Putin, instructed Elvira Nabiullina at the Bank of Russia to defend that until the price cratered. They spent some forex reserves defending the ruble, blah, 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 blah. And then Putin shocked every fucking body within the Russian political establishment to the core when he did these three things over a 48-hour period. Right at the height of the ruble crisis, three things over a 2-week period. The first thing he did was he let the ruble free float. He just backed off defending the ruble. The ruble goes from 30 to 85. And then within 24 hours, he issues two other edicts. One, an economic liberalization package that he pushes through the Duma to change the internal handling of Russian state finances and moving the subsidies out of oil and gas and into agriculture and all the things that we've talked about in the last hour. Look, how the Russians are exporting more grain and more chicken and more all this stuff to the rest of the world. That was one. And the second one was the announcement of major yuan ruble swap lines between them and China. And that ended the ruble crisis. Now, why was the ruble in free fall? Because Gazprom, Rosneft, Lukoil, TNK, all these these companies had massive US dollar denominated debt. Okay. That they bought when the dollar was at the zero bound, or we're still at the zero bound at that point, but we put sanctions on them over Crimea and completely out of the European banking system and the American banking system. And investors in the West were staring at massive losses on bonds that were going to mature in Q4, Q1 of 2015, and all the way through 2015 into 2016. So when they don't have access to the banking system, they can't pay off the bonds. They can't raise capital by rolling the bonds over. They had to pay the fucking bonds off, and they couldn't get the dollars to do it, which is why the Chinese bailed them out by issuing yuan ruble swaps, and then the Chinese basically, paid the debts off to the investors, and then they, ran, and then the Russians paid them, and took yuan in trade and all the rest of it. And then they redenominated all the debt in either yuan, rubles, and by the way, they also redenominated a lot of those that debt in euros in the hope, Europe was thinking, that it would be the meet the new boss, same as the old boss, because then they did the same goddamn thing later on with all this euro denominated debt that Gazprom was holding and Rosneft was holding, and Putin bitched at Alexei Miller and Igor Sechin both, the CEOs of both those companies, saying, get out of the fucking of the euro. They're going to do the same goddamn thing to us. Which they did, but it was to a much lesser extent than it was in 2014. It was acute in 2014. It was like $50 billion in the month of December alone that they had to come up and pay off the bonds with, and they didn't have a dollar. And the Chinese had to do it for them. So it's the same story today that they did in 2014, 2015, which is why the Chinese today can go to Indonesia or Thailand or Malaysia or whomever and say, you know what? We know how to do this. We already did it. And the Russians are going, yeah, we're still standing because of it. Everybody saw it. It's not like these people didn't see this shit. So it's right there. It's it's happening. It's already happened. And it's because of that period of history that the Russians were able to stomach and stand up to the onslaught of sanctions in 2022, because they had already decoupled their entire fucking internal financial system and their local debt markets from the US dollar. And they sold all their US treasuries 6 months before the war broke out.
Same exact topic. It was around 2010, 2011, before the 2014 events, that the U.S., this is coming from a Chinese national that I collaborate with on writing about gold and yuan. He said it was about 2010, 2012, that Russia went to China and said, we're getting out of our treasuries. Would you like to get out as well? Let's do it together. And at the time, China said, no, we're not going to do that because they wanted to get into WTO and what have you. Anyway, the point is, now, if you look at it like between 2012 and 2018, China kept Russia afloat. I mean, right, which is what you said, right? And China advised Russia financially, right? Or they were their bank, right? And now it looks like China is now leveraging that success, which is what you're saying, right? To replicate it with other countries, but simultaneously, Russia is now educating China on financial, on things like oil for gold and things like that. So I just see like the relationship is actually really good. And
it is actually very good.
It'll remain very good until they don't have us as an enemy anymore, I think. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, no, that's another topic for another day. But in the meantime, what the Russians are doing now is developing, just like the Iranians did when we kicked them out of SWIFT, their own reinsurance industry, their own shipping insurance industry, and the Russian financial system, because it's now been completely decoupled from the West, can now
it's a model for them,
and they can now grow into a real domestic financial system, which has been Russia's Achilles heel for the last 10 years. And it's coming, and every time, and I'm telling you, nobody smiled more than Putin when Yellen and company said, okay, you can't, and nobody can insure Russian oil tankers. Because they see that can play before, because we did this shit to Iran. And you know what Iran did? They started their own insurance industry. They started insuring their own stuff, and they started just selling the oil at a discount and saying, look, we'll just sell it at a discount, and you don't have to pay the insurance. Yeah, that's not insured, but hey, you're getting it for $30 off a barrel.
Well, you make it up in price. Exactly.
And you make it up in price.
Exactly. And who do we kill? And who do we kill with that? We kill Europe, because Europe is the part of the world that has the most oil tanker insurance revenues.
Well, that's what City of London is at this point.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Like, I mean, and that's the and so that was no different than, to me, that was a financial nuclear weapon that went off. But the first financial nuclear weapon, and I got this terminology from the great Jim Sinclair. You know, Jim did yeoman's work in the last 15 years of his life to explain all this shit to everybody. But Jim said in 2010, when we went after UBS and the Swiss banks for over their privacy, and we threatened the Swiss with SWIFT expulsion, and then they coughed up they got rid of their privacy laws, and we did it, of course, to say,
stuff,
we're going after Nazis.
Yeah,
we're going after Nazi money. It was all bullshit, right? It was to open up the Swiss banking system. Well, Jim said then, you never go nuclear. That is the equivalent of a financial nuclear weapon going off, and you never go nuclear, because if somebody stands up to you and they say, fine, fucking kick me out.
Right. We telegraphed it to Russia.
There's nothing else. There's no other weapon you can threaten them with. Well, they did this to Iran. Iran survived it. Erdogan helped them by laundering their oil sales through Turkish banks after he made gold a tier 1 capital asset and a commercial bank reserve asset. So the Iranians were negotiating to sell oil for gold, and laundered it all through Turkish banks. I don't know if you guys know this or not. That's why Turkey's official gold reserves have an asterisk next to it, because it's not the amount of gold that the Bank of Turkey owns that matters. It's the amount of gold that flows through the entire Turkish banking system.
Right. Turkey is a flow through. Turkey's a pipeline for gold. Right. They're like, a laundromat, if you want to call it that. But yeah, that's it. Russia was selling their oil to China for yuan and gold, and the gold was going through Turkey to come out the other end. So yeah, Turkey's a pipeline.
But that's how Iran survived. So Iran survived SWIFT expulsion during that time. And I remember listening to, every neocon on the planet, crow, thinking it was going to work. I even remember Jim Rickards saying, talking about how the Iranian real is getting crushed and blah, 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 blah. Don't know if they can survive this or not. I'm like, oh, the Iranians know exactly. So when you make a move like that, even if the people hate their government, if their government, when you attack a population like that, they're like, okay, you guys are the real enemy. We'll deal with our fucking government after we get rid of you fucking people.
Right.
Like, and the same thing, and they're making the same thing, the mistake with the Americans today. Okay, we may hate our government, but we are going to wind up hating fucking Europe more.
Yeah.
Because of the shit that these people are doing to us. Because it's very clear. You can see it on the right, and this shit's now over Israel Palestine. You're starting to see it from the left.
Yeah, it's that's kind of interesting dynamic. We have been trying to influence and control and intimidate externally, since Woodrow Wilson,
Yes.
like, which is basically that's like a Trotsky thing, let's go out there and tell everyone what to do. And now that no one's listening to us anymore, now we're turning internally, telling everyone what to do, and that's not working anymore. So yeah, there's definitely.
Well, I mean, we adopted Britain's foreign policy explicitly under Wilson.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It was explained to me. And I understand it that way. Is that Britain used to go into a country, right? This is from a geopolitical British guy. He's like, Britain would like to go into a country, see who was in charge, and find out who the minority was. And the minority was usually in charge. So it was kind of like a class thing. So you had Sunnis were running, and Shia or Shia were running. Whoever the haves and have-not, you find out who the haves and have-nots were. You arm the have-nots.
Yep.
Right. You overthrow the haves, and then and this is the cool thing. I mean, by cool I mean evil. What Great Britain would do, and this is like sociological, they would go in and they would resurrect cultural ideas that were long out of play, like the caste system that was on its way out in India, and Britain comes in and goes, you know what, we like this caste system thing. Let's go back to that. Don't you want to be? You're a traditionalist. We have so much respect for your culture. It's very woke, We have so much respect for your culture. Yes, you can behead them. It's okay. That's what you do. We'll just help ourselves to this black, oily stuff. Yeah, it's called oil, but it's really
you don't want that stuff.
Here's some more guns. Here's some more guns, and you just keep killing each other.
And then when time is right, you go, oh, by the way, we don't like either of you anymore, and then you leave. And then once you've got them destabilized, this is and the Brits are masterful at this, and they've been. It's their superpower, dudes. I've been saying this, Tommy. How long have I been saying this? Like
as long as I've known you.
Yeah, it's their fucking superpower. These people, they're good at it because they're just like British oligarchy and European oligarchs are just as bad. They are consummate, inbred narcissists. And narcissists are immensely good at triangulating between people.
Yeah.
They're incredibly good at it. And by the way, all the victims of their narcissism have, childhood PTSD and learned behaviors and everything else. But we're starting to realize. But the thing is that, okay, how about I extend that metaphor a little bit further? And then Sergei Lavrov is like the therapist of the world, the geopolitical therapist of the world, to get everybody to understand, no, you don't have to react to this way to these people. This is how you stop being enmeshed with these fucking people, and you make a break. And backed up by Xi, backed up even in many ways by the Iranians. And I think, to talk, you've got it from a number of different vectors. And again, think about this. Saudi Arabia was the key to all of this stuff in the Middle East. And King Solomon naming MBS as the successor over the CIA's man, Naif, right? It's his Naif, or MBZ. And no, Naif. That was the big one, because he was trying to figure out how to get back into power, overthrow MBS, and MBS got wind of all of this shit and said, you know what? Nope. And he locked them all in the fucking hotel room, and he beat the fucking shit out of all of them and said, I'm in charge now.
Right.
And then they tried to, and then there was l'affaire Khashoggi, where they had the the journalist Jamal Khashoggi killed, which is bullshit. He was a CIA asset or an MI6 asset, or same fucking thing. I repeat myself when under stress. I repeat myself when under stress. You know, yes, folks, that's a King Crimson reference. So yeah, no, it's like this is all about trying to keep Saudi Arabia from jumping ship and eventually siding with the Russians, because King Salman went to Putin, MBS went to Putin, like they kept talking to Putin. And why do you think it was so important that Trump kept going to Saudi Arabia and trying to get a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Israel?
Right. That was right. If you make peace with Saudi Arabia and Israel, you isolate Iran, and you by doing that, you also hurt Russia. Right. That was.
But at the same time, the Saudi Arabians under MBS were like, "Oh no, we can be friends with everyone." You can't do that. And they was. I mean, other than Yemen, right? But like the Yemen thing is almost like Saudi Arabia hedging their bets as to who's going to win, because they wanted control of the Gulf of Aden, and that makes sense as well. So, like, but Iran and Russia were never going to allow the Saudis, while allied with the Americans, to control the Gulf of Aden, because the Russians had been moving into Ethiopia and to Djibouti and Eritrea for years. Like, this shit is deep, guys. This stuff's been going on, building up to this head for years, and the Russians have been looking at the friggin' chessboard in a way that, you know, most of us don't have any clue as to what's going on. I mean, I didn't see any of these moves as they were unfolding that way. I can only see them now in hindsight. So I don't get angry with people who don't see the stuff today, because it took me I'm like, you're watching me like in real time over the last 5, 6 years, learn this stuff and get better at it. And the goal now is to disseminate better, to continue disseminating the information, uncover another layer, disseminate it, get it into the zeitgeist, do the thing. Then we can build on that base of knowledge. And then we can like, oh yeah, actually that's how it all works. And if it doesn't fit, and if you get data that doesn't fit, you ask yourself, okay, why? Right? But for the most part, the data all fits.
I kind of got two, I guess, most zoomed out thoughts I can cap it with. One is, it seems like we're approaching like a level of pressure that you either solve, you either release through nuclear war and wipe everyone out, or this is the impetus to become a multiplanetary species. It truly is like, the town ain't big enough for the two of us. Or we really are, we've pushed sophistication far enough along, the automation industry, metallurgy, metamaterials, blah blah blah, that we are, I don't know it might be Marshall McLuhan, but like, we are the biological bootloader. Like, we've set the stage for the machines. Like, when it seems like nothing's working really, it's so intertwined and complex, and we're just constantly at the edge of blowing the shit out of each other. It might be that it's because we're exiting stage left, and none of us can quite put a finger on what the free floating anxiety is. But in hindsight, we might go, oh, it's because it was the end of man. Yeah. That's kind of my thought. It's like,
well,
it might just be it might just be the narcissism of being a living human and going, it all ends now during my life, the life of Tommy, right? That's very, very convenient, right? That the end of humanity comes in my life, right? But it seems like we're coming to the end of, I know we're calling it deglobalization, but like, yeah, I don't know if it's that. It might be that like us. It might be that like we did our thing.
Maybe. Well, I guess understand that, Tommy, the way I look at this is we've mapped all of the threats, the strengths, the weaknesses. We've done the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats, on a lot of the different factions. Now the question is, the ones that are losing, what's their next move? And clearly their next move is, how can we meme the US into a fucking war between either the Chinese or the Russians or whatever. And going back to Vince's point originally, that, oh yeah, we are at war with Russia. Well, yeah, no shit. the better question is the following: is this as it gets, or just about as bad as it gets? And we don't know how to stop looking into the abyss, even though more and more people every day are looking into the abyss going, whoa, what the fuck are we doing? Really? No, we don't want to do that. And then that's when the cycle turns. And living through the peak of the cycle is really dangerous. You know what I mean? Because it's easy to project where we are out linearly from where we are and keep going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing is, and I have a little bit more faith in people. I'm not saying we're going to win. I'm not saying you're not right. That, there may be too much chaos having been already unleashed that we can stop the train.
Yeah.
But the more we talk about how ways in which to stop the train, then the pressure within the zeitgeist eventually maybe should create enough friction to stop the train.
There's that's true. That Tom, you were making a comment about the abyss and all that stuff. There are a couple of remarkable parallels. First of all, I think there's a couple things going on here that might make it less doom oriented, but it is. I mean, it is negative. Don't get me wrong. The first one is the parallel that the words that came out of your mouth reminded me of some things I was reading about pre-World War One, and pre-World War One. And they were, writers in the artist community were and the art was getting really dark for some people, and they're like, what's going on? And the scientists, everybody was very doomy before World War One. They were like, they didn't call it a world war yet, right? There's a big war. It's gonna come. We don't know how, but it's like, and they were very worried about it. But no one, it's almost like they knew it was coming and did nothing about it, or felt they could do nothing about it. Now that's what you sounded like based on things that I've read in the past. Now the parallel continues beyond what you're describing to World War One happened, among other reasons, right? Ottoman Empire and all that stuff, was because of collapsing empires. So World War One was empires were collapsing, whether the Habsburg and all these empires were collapsing, and as empires collapsed, they were deglobalizing, and as they were deglobalizing, there were fights over the last beer in the refrigerator, and as that happened, whoever got shot doesn't matter. It was a resource fight, and so when it happened because they didn't have a plan to deglobalize. And so I think, and this is a little bit tinfoily of me, but I think tying what both of you were saying together with what I know about this, I think we're in a world war right now. And I'm not even being facetious or doomy about it. I feel like there's skirmish wars going on, that's fine, but we're in a world war. And by that, I mean, we know that I'm talking about we meaning the US, powerful, whoever they are. We know that we can't maintain the unipolar aspect that we have over the years. 2014 with Russia, the financial crisis, right? 2008 was the warning across the bow. 2014, and now you are in 2023, where you're openly talking about multipolarity, and the U.S. isn't pushing back. Nobody talked about that shit 5 years ago. We wouldn't let them talk about that. There would be people dying, if you talked about that. Like when Ghana said, we're gonna, we're gonna use gold instead of dollars for oil. And I was like, I was putting my fingers in my ears waiting for the bombs to drop in Ghana, and they didn't happen. And I'm like, well, this is, and then that's where Russia did what they did. They got away with it. It's like, what? Fuck it. We're all going to do it now. And that's what's going on. But to bring it to the situation, I really feel, and Tom Luongo was he may not have been intentionally hinting at it, but he was like, the U.S. how is the Fed talks to the PBOC, right, more than we like to believe. We're closer to them than we are with the ECB now, because the world is a big basket, and we're all on the playground, and there's a big basket, and everyone brings their balls to the recess yard, but now it's like we don't like you, but we're going to let you know what we do before we do it. So we're going to do this, just giving you a heads up, China. Take care of your people. Are you okay with that? Yeah, we're okay with that. And if they're not, they're going to have a fight over it. It's like, I feel like I'm starting to feel like it's all, and I'm not a paranoid person, I'm starting to feel like it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's a controlled descent. Now, I started thinking about this when you saw what was going on in Europe. Everything seems to be like a controlled takedown. Germany letting their businesses leave, talking people into having more with less, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's the whole what's the expression? You'll have nothing and you'll
own nothing and like it or else.
Yeah, right. And they're just horrible marketers. But I know where they're coming from. Like the 15-minute city that they're talking about, the 15-minute city is so poorly labeled. If they would just say, we're going to create neighborhoods, that it would work. Like, they're such horrible marketers. But it feels like everything, especially like Europe was the epicenter of it, everything is reduction in expectations. Have less, do less, we're less of an engine. Whatever the reason for it, that's where they're going. Maybe it's the oligarchs are saying, you know what? I feel like the European oligarchs are saying, we're fucked. Let's make sure we put our caste system in place to keep our people in check. The US, we're not fucked, but we've got to retool, and we can maintain the number one, number two position if we get our shit together. So we're going to democratically make people have less. And that means a little bit of inflation. I'm not saying that Powell's engineering inflation, but a little bit of inflation, smaller portion control. Oh, look, we have medicine to make people eat less. You could just it's just everything is, Maui blows up, let's put a new city there. You have all these American ways of doing things, and you have the European way. European way is manipulation.
Yep.
Right. The American way seems to be
illusion of choice.
Yes, that's it. The illusion of choice democratically. You have all the choice you want. Do you want vanilla or do you want chocolate toothpaste? Those are not existential choices.
You can have any color you want as long as it's black.
What color?
Right, that's it. Right, exactly. So when you look at how this zeitgeist is a good word, right? Tom used that word. The whole world on some level is saying, you know what? We can't keep China down anymore. Okay, well, we can't keep the BRICS down anymore. There's a little bit of a excuse the terminology, but there's a little bit of a slave uproar. Or look at it this way: the BRICS are the labor and the natural resources for the West economic engine. So the West is management, the BRICS are labor, and so labor has gone on strike. And these little wars, they're not little, but they're wars. And so they're renegotiating to have a bigger piece of the profit sharing. And that's what's going to happen. And Europe is selling it to their people by saying, trust me, you'll be happier with less, right? The US is saying, listen, we're not going to shove anything down your throat, but do you want central bank digital currency with or without paper money? Like something like that. We'll get them, they'll get us to vote on it. And in China, and I'm getting on this because it's true, China, Russia, and Iran, and the other BRICS, but primarily it's easy to see in China and Russia, are going with nationalism. Sorry to use that word, sovereignty, right? And so what they're telling their people is, listen, out of the ideology of the hard left, which is what China and Russia rejected, we're going to rebuild nationalistically. Pride, patriotism, and those things are growing, and we can't keep them out anyway. Now, Europe is petrified that the East is going to become basically an Eastern version of fascism or authoritarian communism, like a Stalin type of setup. Who knows? But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, it feels like, to Tom's point, it feels like the end of the world, right? And it also feels like we as a nation or as a region are coming up with solutions to take care of ourselves, and our solutions suit our style. Europe is coming up with a solution to suit themselves, although I don't see it, but that's because I'm not European, right? And China and Russia, I don't understand Russia that well, but China is coming up with a solution to suit itself, return to Confucianism, return to conservatism. It's almost like we're and we won't use the word American pride because that's what Trump would say, because we're worried to death about nationalistic competition or nationalistic Nazi behavior, right? But we're going to say everything else, right? We're going to say everything else. And so I feel like the whole world, to bring it all home, this little rant, that the whole world we're at world war right now. Ideologically, there's differences that are irreconcilable. Economically, we want to continue doing trade. And we know that world wars are really hard to come back from it. So it's almost like China's like, we're going to be number one, but we're not going to abandon the U.S. We need to, we can't turn our backs on your nuclear power. And U.S. is like, you know what? We'll share the stage with you. And Europe's like, what about us, guys? And Great Britain's like, you know what? What about us? Let's see if we can force the Americans off sides.
Right.
And anyway, I just feel
that's the tension, Vince. That's really the issue. Is there are forces operating within the U.S. that understand the problem, and we are still dealing with the Obama interregnum,
right,
or junta, or whatever you want to call it,
right,
to keep us on Europe's path. Okay, and that's the problem.
The convergence between us and Europe.
And the Russians are like, look, we don't want the U.S. to go gently into that good night, because then we have to deal with the fucking Chinese.
Right.
Like, and Putin's thinking about 40 years from now or 30 years from now. He doesn't want to see the United States, brought to the state that Russia was in the 1990s. He knows that that's not good for anybody.
Right.
It was good for Russia. It's not good. It won't be good for Europe. But but at the same time, he's like, look, if you people are not going to treat us with any level of respect, then you are going to have to go to that. They're going to have to go that far, but you're going to do it willingly, and you're going to do it on your own. And we're not going to try and stop you anymore.
Right. It's like pseudo market forces.
So that's
changing over.
That's why Viktor Orban in Hungary is so important. It's why Vučić in Serbia is so important, because all the Warsaw Pact countries,
yep,
and Ukraine, all the Warsaw Pact countries need to go back to being a buffer zone between Western European insanity and the Russians.
Right. Well, they're the stability now. Like they are like, leaving Poland out of this because they have problems with East and West. But they, if you look at, geographically, like you said, geographically, they're the buffer zone. They always were the buffer zone. They're the buffer zone again. Most of them, right? We'll just use we use Poland, for example. Poland is ideologically Western, but they're buying gold. They're not going to turn their backs on their Eastern border.
No, they're not. Even right. Donald Tusk can't form a government, so right. They're not getting rid of the zloty until that happens. Right. Like, there's a lot happening in Poland, and Poland's like, we don't have time for that now because we're basically over time. But Poland becomes a very interesting thing to think about. Poland is a node here. The Japanese are a node. Like when Poland finally starts acting in Poland's best interest and not not allowing their Russophobia and their Germanic phobia, their hatred of both the Russians and the Germans, which is, it's equal on both sides. When they stop acting and abreacting that way as an abused child of both the Russians and
Poland's got issues. Poland's got major issues.
Once the Poles do that, that's going to change the dynamic in Eastern Europe. And I think that the war in Ukraine has been a big wake-up call for the Polish people, and I think in the very good way, because now it's they no longer get to have a leadership that is not serving Poland,
right? Which brings us back to the whole Warsaw area, right? That whole area, all those countries where Proto-Balkan, however you want to call them, those guys, like everyone in Europe is scared to death of sovereignty, right? There's nationalism, right? But I contend that when you prevent nationalism, or when you prevent nationalistic pride, which is always the fallback post ideology, like when you have this high, concept like communism utopia and it collapses, as your economic collapse, you fall back on the lowest common denominator. It's like we're all the same nationality, and you build up from the nationality. China did it after Mao. Russia did it after the USSR. Okay, but the Eastern Bloc countries, this is where the Warsaw Pact comes in. They were under communist rule too. Religion wasn't quite wiped out. They never went hard left.
No,
they were communist.
The Bulgarians are still Bulgarians. The Romanians are Romanians. The Hungarians are very, very strongly, and the Poles are that as well. And I think that ultimately, that's why Ukraine, how the Russians prosecute the end of the Ukraine war, is going to be very interesting. Right. I don't think the Russians are done. I don't think Ukraine is over.
Okay.
I don't think it's over at all. I think the Russians are going to achieve every one of their goals if it takes them another 5 years. And I don't think anybody in the West wants to face that fact. The Ursula von der Leyen's, nobody in the EU wants to believe this, but I think the Russians are like, we can fight this for another 5 years.
Well, I think there's
and they will. If the West keeps pouring money into Ukraine, it will be for 5 years. And the Brits think that they can outlast and bleed Russia white, and the Russians are telling everybody, no, they can't. We can bleed you white.
There are two things about Russia that I know that I'm comfortable saying in agreement with you. One is China is their bank now. That's the first thing. China is their liquidity pool. The second thing is Russia had USSR's peak in terms of its economy was post-war. And because when you have an economy that makes tanks and your USSR, they ended up making refrigerators there too. I'm not saying they were good quality, but the point is what we've done is the bombs that we're throwing in Ukraine at the Russians are really fertilizer for the Russian economy because their manufacturing is coming back. That's what's going on.
I've tweeted about this recently. I said the other day, like, watch, there's the Russians sending out oil tankers. And I said, the next thing you're going to hear, just wait for the headline that says, oh, by the way, Russian reinsurers have a bang up fourth quarter or a bang up Q3. The Russians now have a fully from the ground up, homegrown aerospace industry. They are making commercial airliners 100% sourced within Russia.
You said that.
And the aerospace industry is absolutely a key for driving operational excellence from the top all the way down. Same thing with the car industry, top down. And so it's going to come, and it doesn't. And Putin understands this, and he's taking a long view of it. And so, yes, to your point, you are absolutely right about this. So I think in the end, I want people to take away the two things for the turns. One is Japan. Watch Japan like a hawk. They're going to defend the yuan or the yen, and they're going to defend, and they're going to let their bond market go. Japan is going to renationalize in a way or re-sovereigntize in a way that that very few people understand. The Poles are going to have to make a decision based on how the Ukraine war collapses, how Ukraine collapses and the Russians move in. If the Russians continue to do things the way they've been doing them, which is to slowly but surely, inexorably take territory, win small strategic battles, and just keep grinding out the Ukraine's military, the Poles are going to realize that we're not dealing with the same thing we dealt with after World War II. It's a different Russia. That will change things. Watch Polish politics very carefully. Watch German politics very carefully, because the German government in Berlin could collapse in the next 12 months. Because watch the German Bund market, and then at the same time watch the Japanese. Those are your flashpoints for how does the United States avoid getting involved in a war that we can't afford to fight. Because if we don't fall into that Thucydides trap of fighting a war against rising powers,
right,
then the United States, it'll be a shit show here for a while, but we can get out of it. Right, and if we don't avoid that, and then it comes down to the 2024 election. And if we don't avoid that, well, then we're back to Tommy's point from earlier.
Well, I think Russia doesn't get out of Ukraine for a long time. I want if they get all their geographic goals taken care of, don't they want to just make sure that there is no NATO presence in Ukraine? And the way to do that is just make it.
The Russians will eventually take Odessa.
But I mean,
they will eventually take Odessa, and they will eventually take Kharkov.
That may be the tactical goal, but I mean, the whole point is that they want to make sure that start from the beginning, right? They want to make sure there's no missiles pointing at them from NATO in there.
Well, here's the
So
thing.
you either they control it or they make it functionally dead.
Well, and that's the other thing. Remember, the Europeans want NATO done as well, but that's again another story for another day.
Right.
Be honest with you, we should probably leave it here.
Yeah, I was gonna
because
say,
we have a lot to talk. This is the beginning of another conversation completely.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think we should schedule another one and get to that. We'll wrap it up with maybe more of a pessimistic thought to what you were saying, Vince, about how 5 years ago we'd never even let anyone talk about de-dollarization.
That's right.
You know, before a wave comes in, the water pulls back a little bit.
Yeah.
It makes me think of those fucking tsunami videos where you see people filming on the beach and all of a sudden the water just pulls back like a mile. And all
Yeah.
the birds come flying and they're all like, "What's this?" And you're watching it like, "Oh, Jesus, climb to highland."
Right.
It's too late.
It's kind of scary that everyone's talking about de-dollarization and the United States is really quiet about it.
Yeah, we haven't said anything.
I'm like, I don't look at it as like we're in the free, like we're clear. I'm like, oh, they're not going outside to fight. He's going home to get a gun.
You know, that's funny you're saying.
FYI.
Yeah.
Notice who's pushing the de-dollarization meme. It ain't the United States. It's Europe. It's the European press is the one pushing it. Why? They need to freeze capital in Europe.
Well, that's the diversification.
They can't let the capital leave.
It just seems like.
But Tom, let me throw this in there because you're fucking like hitting something that I've been paying attention to. When the U.S. lets this much shit go on for this long, right? I'm going to be like your echo on this. When the U.S. lets this much shit go on for so long, you get worried that the response is going to be a fucking disaster for whoever's pushing back. Now, paranoia aside, it is a fact. This is empirical. This isn't just this isn't just our feeling. That when you are the incumbent power, whether it be monetary, whether it be economic, whether it be military, you can afford, like a lot of us, it's fashionable too, especially if you're conservative or libertarian, to say the US is fucking up. I can't wait for us to take it on the chin so we can get better. Right? Okay. The other thing is, the US isn't really that weak, It's like, God forbid, like I'm advising Russia and China right now. You guys had better not fuck this up at all, because if you do, then the tsunami comes.
That's exactly right. But yeah, that's exactly right. So I think that at the end of and my dog agrees with me. That's exactly right. And if you listen to Putin and you listen to Xi very carefully, they're both saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Come to your senses. Let's negotiate. Let's get this thing taken care of. And it's the people who are inconsolable on this are the Europeans.
Yeah, no,
I'm just going to continue to pound that point home until everybody gets into their fucking fat heads. I've been right about everything else. I'm going to be right about this one as well.
Yeah, no, it's the wave pulling back. Isn't that kind of weird that like the day hell freezes over for conspiracy theorists, like the U.S. government holding public hearings about UFOs? To me, I'm like, they're just fucking laying out the red carpet for some fucking World War III tech that will make you shit blood.
Right.
That's possible.
They're like, oh, UFOs are here. It's like, oh, fuck. Can you guys please stop with the brick shit? Like, this is about to get so bad so fast. Like,
but Tommy, they released all the January 6th videos yesterday.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's a big fucking tell that shit's happening good things are happening on Capitol Hill, dude.
Water's pulling back. The water's pulling back. The birds are flying, and everyone's like, "What's wrong?" It's like, dude, Godzilla's about to come out of the water and rape you to death.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So,
all right, man.
But guys, let's wrap this one up. Guys, go to the description. Please go follow them both on Twitter. I say we do a part 2. This was good. Aside from, my conclusion being Godzilla's going to rape you to death. All things considered, I don't know. Maybe
not that there's anything wrong with that.
Maybe. I mean, if you're into Godzilla, I mean, that's.
If you're into tentacle porn, I guess Japanese tentacle porn.
If you're into that, then you know what? Back to Japan. Tom's point. Yeah. But let's wrap this one up, guys. Please go to the description. Please go check out them on Twitter and all that good shit. But yeah, gentlemen, thank you so much, and let's schedule another one. Till
Thanks
next
for
time.
having me.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for having
much,
us.
guys. Thank you for
Enjoy your
watching.
afternoon. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, Tommy, and Vince. You too.
Yeah,
Happy Thanksgiving,
Happy
guys.
Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And yeah, till next time, guys.